Hi guys, how you doing? So today I'm going to be talking about Spring security and securing your RESTful endpoints. But first, let me tell you where I am. I'm in Newcastle in County Down, and I had a beautiful stay here in the Slieve Donard Hotel. I'm going to spin around here, and I hope you can see the Moor Mountains here behind me. So it's a beautiful day here, nice morning, nice and fresh, and see the ocean behind me, down the coast here, and we're on a beautiful beach here this morning. Of course, lots of pebbles and stones, and the tide's out. So today, what I'm going to be doing when I get home is actually creating a RESTful endpoint, and I want to secure that RESTful endpoint. So when you create your controllers, you pretty much don't want anyone to be able to call them. You want to know who's calling your controller and what they have access to. So you want to make sure you have some kind of coarse-grained security, and you want to have some finer-grained security. So you can do this with Spring Security, and you can use the likes of LDAP, so you can say, okay, what role does this ID have, or it's a system ID, maybe it's a user ID, what they can access. Or you can do this with JDBC database. You can load up roles that way. You can use an in-memory database to secure your RESTful endpoints, and that way you make sure you know who's actually calling your services, what they can access, make sure the security is in front of them, as you don't want to have any security vulnerabilities or anyone accessing your services. So I hope you enjoy this video. It's a lovely day here in Newcastle. I'm going to show you some views here. So this is where we stayed, Slieve Donard Hotel. You got some, we're on the coast here. And these are the Moor Mountains. So I encourage you to go and look them up online if you haven't already. This is the promenade. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and make sure if you haven't, you subscribe to the channel. The channel's growing. I'm approaching 500 subscribers. I had no idea that actually you guys would enjoy watching these videos, but it seems to be taking off, and I quite enjoy it myself. Hi guys, so today what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a Spring Boot project. I'm then going to create a couple of RESTful endpoints. So they're going to be through Spring RESTful controllers, where there'll be annotated REST controller. We're then going to go ahead and enable Spring Security and enable authentication and authorization on top of our paths. So that would be the URIs that our RESTful API will be exposed on. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and create a new Spring starter project. And from this starter project, we want to bring down the web dependency. You would also want to bring down the security dependency, so that the core security. But in this instance, I'm going to leave it out because I'm going to show you what the defaults the core security gives you when you add it into your application. So go ahead and click next and click finish. Allow that to create the project for you in your IDE. Once that finishes, you can go ahead and open up the project, and you'll see we have the standard Spring Boot main method. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and create your actual REST endpoint. So in Spring, what we're going to do is create a controller. So we're going to create an account controller and click finish. And we want to annotate this method with REST controller. And now what we want to do is go ahead and actually create a RESTful endpoint. So you have the request mapping annotation, and we're going to create a public endpoint. So we're going to say get public account data linked to, and then what we're going to use is a path variable, and we're going to bring in an account number. So final int account number, and then we're just going to return public account linked to, and then we'll add on the account number. And of course we need to expose that on an actual endpoint. So what we're going to do is pass in the endpoint here, and we're going to say service svc slash the version of the service, version 1. We're going to say okay, public, and then we're going to use the path variable account number. So what we also want to do is create another one of these, and this is going to be for the private account data. So we're going to do that, and we're going to change this to private. So it's a private account number, and we can also change the method name. So get private account data linked to account number and account number. So if I go ahead and run that, there's going to be no security on our application. So you're going to see that start up. It's going to start up in a couple of seconds. The white label error page, if I go to the URL, which is going to be service public account number. Actually, I want to add in accounts here. So accounts, and I'm going to restart that. So run as Spring Boot application. So you can see get public account link to that, and it's anyone can call it. And if you type in private, get private account link to 5. So they're both open. There's nothing secure in them, so it's a basic application. So if you go ahead and open up your POM, and that's going to be where all of our dependencies in our application are defined. And you can see that there's no security dependency. And if we did check the checkbox back at the start when we were creating the project using an initializer, it would appear here. But what we want to do is now go ahead and drop that in. So I'm going to bring in the dependency. I'm going to save that, and you'll see that the building the workspace has now been completed. So if we go to dependency hierarchy and type in security, there you're going to see our security dependencies are now on our application's class path. So if we go ahead and rerun this application without making any changes, just one dependency change, and you should see that it generates a password here. So there's a password now generated. You may be wondering what that's for. Well, I'll tell you in a second. Well, if you go ahead here, you'll see that there's a private account linked to 5. This is what we were doing. If we hit that again, you'll see that it's now asking for a login prompt. And if we go to the public, it is also asking or also looking for a login prompt. So this is coarse grained security across your whole application enabled by default. So this is good because maybe you have not secured your application correctly. Maybe you're missing an annotation. Maybe Spring's not doing something right. Well, it'll basically protect your whole system for you by default, which is good. But you definitely do not want to use this in production, as every time you restart the application, that ID or that password is probably going to change. So you don't have a consistent way of actually accessing your services. You definitely want to talk to JDBC database, or maybe you want to call it using OAuth 2 or some kind of token mechanism, or whatever your security solution is. Maybe it's LDAP. So let's go ahead and actually call this service. So using the default is this. So I'm going to paste that in there, and I'm going to use the username of user. And of course, now we get access to actually log into our application. So if you recall it, you'll see that it's submitted again. So if you inspect this in Google Chrome, go to network, and then you're going to hit it again. You're going to see the HTTP requests here. And inside, you're going to see that it's automatically added the basic authentication or authorization header. So that's going to be basic, and then that's the base 64 string of username : password. So that's not encrypted. So you definitely, if you're going to be using basic authentication, you always want to do it over HTTPS. So HTTPS secure. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our custom security configuration in our Spring Boot application. So you want to stop that. You want to go to your account controller. And now what you want to do is go ahead and create a security config class. So if you create a class, and we're going to put this under the package config, which again is under config start account. So Spring Boot is going to pick this up for us. And let's just call security config. Go ahead and click finish. In here, you'll see that we have a class. Well, what we actually need to do is annotate this class with enable web security. Now, if you go ahead and, I wonder what happened there, enable web security, click enter. If you go ahead and read the actual documentation in this class, you can see that it provides configuration for Spring Security, and we need to extend the web security configurer adapter class and override the individual methods. So in here you can see that we can override configure web security. We can also override configure HTTP security. So this is the first one we're going to override. So this is going to allow us to define a fine-grained different APIs. So we can say this URL or this path has to be fully authenticated. So the user must be able to log in, and they must have these certain roles. So when you log in, you're going to load up roles against your ID, and then you can protect different URLs with different roles. So not all users who authenticate against the system should be able to access everything. There should be authorized to certain roles. So authentication and authorization there. So as you can see here, this URL or this other URL has this role. So we're gonna talk you through that in a second. And you've got a form login. So Spring will automatically generate a form login page for us if we do not have our own login page, our own custom login page. And in this method here, we're going to have configure authentication manager builder off. Inside here, this is where we define where our actual configuration of our authentication is going to be performed. So in this instance, we're saying it's an in-memory authentication, and you're going to populate that in-memory database there with usernames and passwords and roles. So this admin account is going to have user and admin, while user only has the user role. And I'll put that in my example next. You could also, this is where you would substitute this for the likes of LDAP authentication, and you're going to call out an LDAP server, or you could use some kind of token-based security, auth2, or any of the newer tokens available. So let's go ahead and actually extend this class. So we want to take a copy of this, and we want to extend the web security configure adapter class. So go ahead and import that in. And what we're going to do now is start overriding the methods. So let's remember the first method, which I think was configure, and we passed in the HTTP security. So HTTP security, and we also override the method. So override, and this is where we say HTTP dot, we're going to say authorize requests. So we're going to start restricting requests, and what we want to do is create an ant matcher. So you could define it by HTTP method and the pattern, but in this instance we're going to say all methods, and we only want to restrict it based on the patterns. So if we go back into our account controller, we would take the public method or the public path, and we're going to paste it in here. We're going to say service version 1 public accounts account number. So what we're actually going to do is change that account number to an asterisk, a star. So it's going to say, okay, anything in accounts, and it's not a double asterisk. Let's make that clear. And we're going to say has role. We're going to create a user role, and we're also going to create another one. So we're going to say ant matchers. And we're going to say service public 1 accounts, and we're going to say private, and we're going to say has role, and we're going to say user again. And if the reason why I'm doing this is because I just realized we should probably make the public accessible to anyone, not just public to users. If it says public, it should be public to everyone in my eyes. That doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and create service version 1 private accounts must be an authenticated and authorized user. And what we want to do is provide some way of authenticating that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use basic form login. So this is where you could use basic authentication or whatever you would like. And if you had a custom form login page, you could go ahead and add in form URLs here or the login page, and that'll basically allow you to provide a specific custom URL page. But we don't need to do that in this case. We're going to allow Spring to do its magic for us. So go ahead and add the throws. There's exceptions. Save that. So basically here we're saying we're going to authorize requests going to service version 1 private accounts and anything in the next piece. And they must be a user, and they're going to be logging in via form. So what are they going to be authenticated against? Well, this is where we use the configure global method, and as long as we provide the configure global method inside a class that is annotated with enable web security, then we will be good. Otherwise, it's pretty cagey there, you know. You don't know if it's going to configure it right or not. So this takes an authentication. So authentication manager builder. So we're going to call this auth, and we're going to auto wire this class. So we're going to auto wire the auth in here. We're going to say auth dot in memory authentication, and we're going to give it a user. So with user, we're going to say Philip, and we're going to give a password of course. We're going to give a role of user, and what we're also going to do is create another account, and we're going to say with user again, and this time we're going to give a user of start, and the password's also going to be password, and we're going to have a role of user, and we're also going to give them the role of admin. So now we have two users. We have Philip and we have start. One has one has a role of user. The other one has a role of user and admin. Go ahead and throw that. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and run this application. So now you can see that from our logs that there was no password automatically generated like the previous example. And if you come back here, you'll be able to see if we go ahead and submit a request to public accounts, it should be fine. We can access that. But if we submit a request to private accounts, we're going to get a prompt and it's automatically going to send us the login page. And here we have a username and password. And I'm going to use the password, Philip. If we get that wrong, then you're going to say bad credentials, and if we get it right, we're going to log in and we're going to be able to proceed to the account URL. So that's great. Now we have some basic security in front of our application. Well, what we want to do is, actually I'm going to demo to you how you can restrict it based on roles. So if we go ahead to our account controller and let's go ahead and create another RESTful endpoint, and we're going to say private accounts, and then we're going to add an admin here / account number, or actually we'll put admin first. So service version 1 private admin accounts account number, and we're going to say get extra private info and save that. Well, let's go ahead and secure this. So we go back to our security config. We're going to go in here and say ant matchers, and we're going to say service version 1 private admin. We'll say anything after admin, so not 1 asterisk but 2, and we're going to say has role admin. So anything private admin, anything after that must be admin. So I'm going to just do a little bit of refactoring here. So because I'm starting to duplicate a lot of stuff, what I can do is just go ahead and extract out constants. So there we have a user and we also have an admin. And we could also go ahead and do this for URLs and things, as I probably would in a real application. So if we go ahead and run this as Spring Boot application, you'll see that I'm going to log in as Philip and I'm going to try and access the admin URL. So the first thing I'm going to do is access the normal URL. It's going to prompt me to log in. I'm going to then log in. And now what I'm going to do is say private admin account 5, and you're getting a forbidden, so 403, so that's unauthorized user. So I'm authenticated against the system, but I'm not allowed to access this certain data. So what I want to do is log out, and I didn't enable the logout page by default, so I'm going to go ahead and rerun the Spring Boot application. And what I'm going to do is access the accounts URL, and this time I'm going to log in as start. And now you see we can access this, and if we go to private admin accounts, we can access the admin accounts as well through start because it has the additional admin role. So this is a very quick introductory section to Spring Security and how you can start to use this in your application. You know, this is such a basic example, but I encourage you all to go ahead and actually explore Spring Security. You know, the Spring developers and all the guys involved in the Spring projects really put a lot of time and effort into developing their documentation. And it doesn't matter how you want to secure your application. If you search it in Google, or maybe if you go on Twitter and ping some of the guys, you'll be pointed in the right direction. And even if you want to contact me, leave a comment or email me or whatever you want to do, I'll help to point you in the right direction as well. I guess I really enjoy doing these videos, really enjoy coaching and giving back to the open source community. This is my small way of giving back because, you know, as a developer, as I was growing up, you know, I was always looking online, reading all this content. And at some point in your life, you have to stop just consuming content, but actually produce content and give back to the community. And that's why I do these videos. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe, and I'll be uploading more content soon. I'm actually designing a Java Clean Code course, which I'm going to put online free. So it's going to be like a 20-part series of developing clean code. So that's, you know, going through things like your methods, making sure they're small, test-driven development, you know, solid, KISS, dry, all these acronyms. What do they mean? How do you apply it to your code? Using things like the builder pattern. And just making sure your code is really clean, because if you're developing clean code, then that means you can develop more functionality quicker to your customers, which is ultimately the end goal. So make sure you subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will speak to you next time. Bye bye.